Which is I'm like, but he's not. Why would she say?
I have contracts.
I mean, and that one, I mean, I have no. Yeah, stuff like that. Parents issue. And so we just went on all that roads and the pictures great.
You're fine. You're fine. This is Relief Society. We love to visit more than we love to do just about anything.
Don't
So
follow my example, follow your president.
no, that's great. I just want to welcome everybody to Relief Society this morning. Thanks for coming. And it looks like, Sarah, you've got a visitor with us.
I do. Probably most know because we've been here a long time. This is my mom, Trisha, and they're in transit. They flew in this morning and they fly out this afternoon. So they just are here for a.
Where are you coming from and where are you going?
We were back east and we're going home to Cedar City.
Oh, all right. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you with us. We love to have anybody and everybody who will join us. So thanks for being here. By way of announcement, I just switched computers and haven't got everything synced, and so I can't access the announcements. So Bishop, you can help me if I miss any activities, but I think as far as Relief Society goes, we're good. And we've recently done ward activities, so we're all good. If you've got a seminary graduate tonight, congratulations to you and to them. But otherwise, I think that is all the announcements that we have. And so I do want to thank everybody for their help with the walkabout. Brandy, awesome job. You're amazing. And for the linger longer last Sunday, that's like double duty for an activity. So you get like extra gold stars for that. I will just make the announcement that Welfare Square assignments have changed. It was in the newsletter. If you have an assignment starting at 7:30, it's actually 8 o'clock. So you get an extra half hour. So if you fall in that category,
there or
yeah, you don't have to be there until 8 o'clock. So you get to sleep a little bit longer. But anyways, that's all of our announcements. So we'll turn the time over to Lara to teach us today. And she is going to be, her lesson is going to focus on Elder Gong's talk that is, what's it called? We
each have
We
a
the story. That's right. All right. Thanks, Lara.
Oh, thank you. All right. Gotta get my tissues because so this, I think this talk was from just this recent conference. And it's Elder Gong talking about I have to say, when I saw the list that Cindy emailed, I was like, and I read kind of the first couple of paragraphs of this talk, I was like, oh, genealogy. I don't want to talk about that. Anyway, but I was reassured that when I finished the talk, and I didn't think it was just about that can play into it, but he talks about where we come from and kind of why that is important to know. And I brought some visual aids up here. I don't know if you guys can see these, but this is my great-grandmother, and she died when I was in high school at the age of 105. So, yeah, I hope I don't get that longevity. But I have a lot of memories of knowing her and growing up with her. And I'm grateful for that. Her husband, my great-grandfather, passed away when I was a much younger child, but I still do have some memories of him. This is a picture of my grandmother. This is her daughter with me at my wedding. And this is my grandmother and my mom and me. And this is a picture of my grandma with Ian. I'm already crying, when he was a few months old. And then this is that same grandmother with Ian and my little niece. And they're about to go on a little hike at our family cabin. And then this is that same grandmother. I love this grandmother, obviously. So Ian and his great grandmother making Christmas cookies, which we do together every year. And she's very patient with him and his sprinkles. And then this is just a picture of my dad holding Ian when he was brand new. Anyway, so I may get back to some of that, but Elder Gong opens his talk by saying we each have a story. As we discover our story, we connect, we belong, we become. And then he goes on to kind of explain the origin of his name and how it comes from, like, it's Dutch and American and Chinese. And I love this. This is kind of what Bridget mentioned this when we were talking about this lesson the other day, had this thought that, like he says, whatever the total number of individuals who have lived on earth, it is finite and countable and one person at a time. You and I, we each matter. And so he asks, do you know your story? Do you know what your name means? And kind of, do you know where you come from? And why does anyone have a thought of, like, why is that important? Like, who cares? Why should we be familiar with our heritage or our ancestors or kind of our people who have come before us? What does that do for us? Anybody have any thoughts? Yes.
When we make those connections, like when we start to not reach out, but as we learn more about anyone who lived before our past, ourselves, we make a connection, and then as we do that, we feel a sense of belonging, and then that is so important to our human needs and human development. And as we feel that belonging, then we are it's so much easier for us to reach out to others and help them feel that too.
Yes, thank you. I wrote, like, my answer, a sense of belonging. That I love that you said that. Anybody else have any thoughts about that? Okay, I think too it gives you kind of a that wasn't a hand, was it? Okay, you were just adjusting. Kind of like knowing your people and having things in common that, you know, maybe you normally wouldn't. I have quite a large extended family, and I have cousins that I wouldn't necessarily interact with if we were not related. But we have common love, you know, for the same people who came before us, and that is kind of a uniting thing in and of itself. And I think it's helps you feel connected and part of something more and bigger and eternal and something that's going to last forever. Let's see.
Laura, I would also
Yes.
say, I noticed this especially in my husband's family, because the Richards family is huge.
Mhm.
And just his part of the Richards family is big. And that sense of belonging that they all have gives them this great sense of self-worth, because they really love and care about each other, and because they feel loved and cared about by all of their relatives. They have this, there's an amazing amount of confidence in the Richards family. It comes at birth, and it's there because they feel that they are important, and they're shown that through their history and their relatives. And so I love the confidence that comes in knowing where they come from, but also being loved by those who came before and those who are there presently.
And those who came before that they don't even know, right? That maybe have passed on or have left this legacy of
Yes, exactly.
that goes through generations.
Definitely,
Yes.
definitely. That there's a way that they love and care for each other, because that was a standard that was set long ago.
Thank you. I love that. Yes, Bishop.
I think Bridget and Joanne explained it beautifully. I would just add that there's some characteristics that I have that I can't explain until I start digging into my heritage and my family and getting into what their circumstances were. And as I find out where that came from, it really helps me to explain and understand who I am
Mhm.
and where I come from. And instead of feeling kind of like I'm the only one that feels a certain way, or there's a characteristic that nobody else shares, and I feel a little strange about it. When I can connect to that, it really helps me to, I don't know, to feel justified in my quirkiness.
Yes.
But also I really enjoy also knowing that somebody else was like that. And I feel a part of something greater than just me. It's really helpful.
And then maybe it makes you appreciate that about yourself,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
instead of,
It turns from a quirk to maybe like, oh, I kind of like that.
Uh-huh.
better now.
yeah, thank you. Elder Gong says that, well, he talks about, like, if you ask most people, like, what's the most important thing to you in your life, most people respond with my family, you know, families. He says this includes family living and gone before. Of course, when we die, we don't cease to exist. We continue to live on the other side of the veil. Still very much alive, our ancestors deserve to be remembered. And then he references the scriptures, and he refers to Nephi writing on the plates, and then Mormon abridging them, and Alma giving Helaman the records and commanding him to keep a record of the people. And it says over and over in the Book of Mormon, you know, it's for a wise purpose that they are kept, and it's wise purpose that I know not. So I guess why is that important? Like, why was it so important to Heavenly Father that those records be kept, and that those records were passed on to generations? Any thoughts about that? Or answers, I guess.
So Laura,
Yes.
I have kind of a personal connection.
Mhm.
I mean, not talking so much about the plates, but I'm number 5 out of 6 kids. Let's see if I can say this without getting all emotional. And my dad was diagnosed with MS when I was like an infant. And so I grew up with him very sick, and you know, he became paralyzed, and I always, with each child I had the overwhelming feeling of I hope my children know who my dad is. And I knew the years were numbered. And when Reagan was a baby, he asked me he had handwritten a personal history over decades. And it was all handwritten in this cursive that was hard to read. And he asked me if I would type it up. And I spent months while Reagan would nap, and I would be on the phone with him, and I would type it and try to decipher what he was actually saying. And I would bring him up, you know, drafts of it, and he would make corrections, and I'd go back, and we have this beautiful, like, leather bound book that each of us have now. And I don't think, obviously, he was alive. It was just kind of like, yeah, okay, it's done, you know. And Reed would have to take photos because it was just like you can scan in your own things, and he would use a scanner at work, and we would scan in all these documents so that we each had them. And when he died, the only way I can explain it to people is, it's like when you have a child, you're different after that. You can never go back to you just view the world differently. And when he died, I just viewed the world differently. All of a sudden I felt this responsibility to pass on his legacy. And in order to pass that on, we have to know it. And so by having things like that personal history, and by learning about our ancestors, and having it written down, we're able to pass it on in a more authentic and meaningful way, I think.
Mhm. Thank you. And it does, I mean, it will help his posterity know him, even if they didn't get the chance to meet him.
Absolutely. And there are things that I learned that I didn't know, you know, the struggles that he had of being diagnosed with this illness and the emotional and mental toll it took. And I didn't know that growing up. It was just that my dad could slowly not run or, you know,
Mhm.
and so it helped a lot, especially as like Reagan recently has been dealing with a lot of heavy, you know, transition of becoming an adult, and it's hard, and it seems like the weight of things becomes extremely heavy. And she actually took his personal history and she said, "Can I borrow this and take this up to school?" And I said, "Absolutely." And she'd come back, and I think seeing the struggles and trials he went through gave her an extra confidence that she could deal with them too.
Mhm. He talks about that. He says in this talk, connecting with our ancestors can change our lives in surprising ways. From their trials and accomplishments, we gain faith and strength. From their love and sacrifices, we learn to forgive and move forward. Our children become resilient. We gain protection and power. Ties with ancestors increase family closeness, gratitude, miracles. Such ties, sorry guys, can bring help from the other side of the veil. So perfect example. Thank you for sharing that. My grandfather, who was just like a beloved man in our family, he was the husband of this grandmother up here. These are my maternal grandparents that I'm talking about. He died when I was in high school of heart disease. He was pretty young, in his 60s. And I remember after the day, like the afternoon that he passed away, a bunch of us went over to my grandparents' house. And so it was his, you know, my parents or my mom and her siblings, and then some of the grandkids were over there, and we were just kind of talking about funeral arrangements and, you know, memories of him. And there was, my mom comes from a family of 6 kids, and the youngest and the oldest are like 21 years apart. So there was kind of this group of us cousins that were older. We were in high school, and then the next kind of batch of cousins were toddlers. There was quite a difference between us. And my cousin, who was around my age, was just really like angry and sad. I don't know why I'm crying. I'm sorry. I just got a pair of balls and it's obnoxious. But she said, I'm just so upset that we, like the older cousins, got to know this great man. And she said, I'm so sad that the younger ones aren't going to know him. And one of my aunts said, you know, kind of same thing, that's not true. Like they will know him if you guys tell them, and if you guys, you know, talk about him and tell stories, and they can know him in the way that you guys did, and still kind of have that relationship. Anyway, so kind of along the same thought. So thanks for sharing that. This is kind of moving on, but like, how do we just kind of talked about this. How do we benefit when we connect with other generations? He says, in this age of I choose me, societies benefit when generations connect in meaningful ways. We need roots to have wings, real relationships, meaningful service, life beyond fleeting social media veneers. And I have several examples of this in my own family. One of whom is my grandmother that I keep talking about, but she is just an amazing inspiration. She's 95. And she, once the grandkids turned 16, she, instead of giving a birthday gift, she takes us out to lunch just by ourselves. And it's just such a, like, I love that tradition, because it gives me time just with her, you know, and it's really been a blessing to me, like just the time I get to spend with her one-on-one. Every birthday of everybody in like her, all of her descendants, like her kids, their spouses, their kids, their spouses, I mean, Ian gets handmade birthday cards from her every year, handmade Halloween cards. And she, there's a joke in our extended family that at Christmas time, we have gingerbread cookies that are boys. We have little gingerbread boys and girls too with little dresses. And I come from, my mom has a lot of very strong feminist sisters. So they say only in this family would you have to have gingerbread girls with the boys. But my grandmother has made them every year since I was born. And there was several years ago for Christmas, she gave all of the granddaughters cookie cutters that were the little gingerbread boys and girls. And then she had hand wrote her gingerbread recipe. I mean, there had to have been 20 of us at least, probably. And she was in her 80s, and that would have been hard to do. And she could have easily, you know, just typed it up and made copies and stuck it in a little, sleeve. But she hand wrote each one so that we would have that memory of her. And I love that. And she was just somebody who was so strong in her like convictions and her testimony, but still was really supportive. I have an aunt who is her youngest daughter, who's a little bit, she's made different choices in life. She and her boyfriend lived in a band for a while, and they're musicians, and they go like play on street corners sometimes, and they go downtown and, you know, play at some of the bars. And there's my, 90-year-old grandmother down at the bar downtown to see her, to support her daughter. And, she'd be at church the next morning, but she just had such a way of loving, which has been a huge example to us. There was another example. I don't know if this is super appropriate, but I'm going to share it anyway. So sorry, Bishop, if it's not. But she has, in her house, kind of has like a separate entrance for that can be an apartment. And my brother, after college, was renting that from her. And he accidentally left his alcoholic beverage bottle out where she would see it one night. I don't even know where he left it or how she found it, because she didn't, anyway. And he said, I opened the door once to go into the apartment, and the empty bottle that I had thrown in the trash was just sitting at the door to my apartment. And that was her way of, I guess, just telling him that she knew the choice that he had made. And then the next time he saw her, She said, I don't know what's more stupid, you choosing to do that or you leaving it so that I could find it. But she just was always very good about getting her beliefs across in a way that was with love. And that was a great example to all of us. So I would love to hear, like, does anybody have any like special memories of a parent or a grandparent, or as a grandparent, you know, are there certain special ways that you find to connect with your grandkids? Or any thoughts about how we can kind of make those connections?
I can start us off.
Okay, thank you.
My grandmother Helen, my father's mother, was the sweetest woman on the planet to this day, Sarah included. She is seriously the kindest person I've ever known. And my parents, I come from 8 kids, and we lived about 5 blocks from my grandma Helen, who was widowed when she was young. And she would take each of us to her house because she lived closer to our middle school. She would take each of us every night of the week. So she'd take we each had a night that we got to go hang out with grandma, and she would get us off to school. And it was a tremendous help. I'm realizing this now. It was a tremendous help to my mother and to my dad because there were so many of us. But whenever we would go there, she as she would learn about us, she would set the house up for us each night. Like, I liked playing certain games. They were right there. Like, we didn't realize she was doing this until we started to collaborate as kids later on. But my favorite cold cereal was in the fridge. My favorite sandwich was in the bag. My favorite everything was ready to go. Down to the ice cream that I liked. And she would switch it up every night for us. And I just thought, that was like one story of 1,000 that I have with my grandmother Helen. Kylie was almost named Helen. But I just loved her. I'm so grateful for her. And like, there's a word that keeps coming into my brain. It's the word precedent. In architecture, precedent is really helpful for people to be able to go back and see what buildings stood the test of time. And I think that's the case with our people that have gone before us. They set precedent, especially in different times than we're in. And they show us how to build relationships. And my grandmother Helen was the relationship building queen. And I love her. I love her. I go to her gravesite every year, still, in Provo, a long drive. And I just think she's amazing. So that's just one example.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
That's a long drive.
I'm just teasing you because
South of 33rd to me is a long drive.
My mom was buried in Alamo, Nevada.
Oh,
That's a really,
That's a long
and
drive.
we're like, why? Anyway, that's not what I wanted to share. Anyway, when I was dating Gerrit, we were just having so much fun. And it was really fast. Like, we were married in 5 months. And but he wanted me to meet his grandmother who lived up in Holiday, where the Holiday City Center is. She lived right in that park area where they made it a park. And to me it was like no big deal, like, I'm gonna meet a grandma. We weren't really we were just having fun so far. And wasn't really serious. But Gerrit knocked on the door, and she's 99 when I meet her. And she opens the door and she gives him a hug, and then she looked at me and I looked at her and she goes, it's about time. I've been waiting so long for you. And it's like our spirit spoke at that one moment, like, oh my gosh, I've known you before, like in the pre-existent. That's how it felt. And just to make that spiritual connection, and then to see how during our relationship flourished and grew. We were boyfriend and girlfriend, but and we kind of knew where it was going, but it just was so amazing to see that. And Gerrit was named after her, not Redford, sorry, was named after her. And it has given Redford a really sweet connection. Because she, like Christine, they wrote their whole life histories and stories. And so Red goes back to those and is able to see her life and what she had done and accomplished. And it's just so awesome to have that. On my mother's side, we don't have that. My mother burned her journals.
Because she didn't want people to read them.
Yeah. So she got rid of them, and it's like, we need those, And I just really feel like Gerrit's family is very anyway, I can't say it. Chronological. Yeah, everything. And I appreciate that because it gives our girls a different perspective. And anyway, I just think oftentimes the Spirit's there to teach us and to connect us with our ancestors. And I just always appreciate that experience for Gerrit's family.
Thank you. I think it does, I have some examples of people in my family who have passed away, who have been really great examples of faith. I have my favorite aunt, who was just an amazing woman, passed away from cancer 2.5 years ago, and it was kind of a prolonged process. So, we knew that it was coming. And she had some time with her daughters and her grandkids, to kind of say her goodbyes. But I went over one afternoon to her house to say goodbye to her. And I remember I said to her, I gave her a big hug, and I said, I can't believe that I'm never going to see you again, or I can't believe this is the last time I'm going to see you. And she was like, that's ridiculous, She said, it's not, I'm going to see you. And she was just so certain of that. And even though I have a testimony of, the pre-existence and the fact that we're going to get to be with our families, it's really hard to remember that in those moments. And so that was just a great reminder, of the eternal nature of families to me. Anyone else have any thoughts about that? Yes, Bridget.
Well, I like Elder Gong says, as he's talking about our family relationships, he says such ties can bring help from the other side of the veil. And I had an experience, Jonathan's family is all boys, there's 5 of them, and their mother was a constant server. She loved to serve those boys. And in fact, my sister-in-laws and I often joked about getting t-shirts when we would be up at the family cabin that would say, it's all about the food. Because the food was to feed those boys. I mean, we wondered what she thought happened to them the other 360 days of the year when they were living with us, because that they were alive and they still got fed because, she just was so worried that they'd get fed all the time. It was such a huge focus for her. And she passed away. And we went up to the family cabin. We opened it Memorial Day weekend, and it was the first. She passed away in the fall. So this was the first time that we've been to the cabin without her. And it just so happened that none of my sister-in-laws were able to make it, so it was just me. And it was me with my husband and his father and his 5 brothers. And Sunday dinner was an even bigger deal. And she was a wonderful cook. And so there I was by myself to fix Sunday dinner for these boys, and I was just so worried about it. And hoping that I could do it justice. And the oven's a little bit funny, and she had this way with it, and I never learned it because that was her thing. And so anyway, so when it came time for me to cook Sunday dinner, I felt that day, I could feel her, that she was there with me. Because I was totally alone to do it myself and to try to fill her shoes. And I know she was there with me, and it worked out. And I'm not going to say it was perfect like hers, but I'm going to say it was pretty good. It was edible and passable. Like they all seemed satisfied. And so I that's one experience that I've had where I definitely feel like that help comes from the other side of the veil. But I can also say I never knew my grandmother on my father's side. Both of his parents passed away before I was born, but my grandmother left behind a history. And I have read her history, and I know who I am because I've read about her. And I'm like, oh, like the bishop said, I know why I am the way that I am. I'm kind of a straight line kind of person. I'm a little bit of a sergeant. I'm like, oh, she was too. Awesome. Like it's fun to get that from her and to have that connection. And I sometimes wonder when I'm in the middle of doing things, I think of her sometimes and wonder if this was how she was, if this is how her life was, and I can feel strength from that and know that I can do hard things and many things because she did many things. And so I love those connections, but I'd also just say that one of the things I really loved about Elder Gong's talk was that he also goes on to mention that, I think family ties are so strong and they bind us so tight or make us feel, they can make us feel so great, but not everybody has that. And I love that he touched on that because I can say that there have been other people in my life who have been like second parents to me, who have come along in times in my life and have set examples for me and been there for me. And I think the common thread through like everything that's been shared that I think is so touching is that it's the seeing of yourself and also feeling seen by others and being acknowledged, recognized. And I think anytime that we're acknowledging others or recognizing others or cheering others on, that those ties and those bonds are what this is all about, because we all do go back to Adam and Eve. So we really all are family. We are a ward family. As we serve and strengthen each other, we strengthen our ward family. And those bonds can grow just as strong and just as tight. And I've seen that in this ward, that there is a tie and a bond that does wonderful things and can accomplish amazing things and blesses lives in incredible ways.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, that was long.
No, thank you.
That was multifaceted. Sorry.
No, I'm glad that you said that because I was going to get to, he does say, like, just as joys come in families, so can sorrows. No individual is perfect, nor is any family. When those who should love, nurture, and protect us fail to do so, we feel abandoned, embarrassed, hurt. And so, he says, with heaven's help, we can come to understand our family and make peace with each other. And then he references that scripture in Matthew that says, blessed are the peacemakers. And then he says the same thing. Your community can become a family. Genetics and family patterns influence but do not determine us. And he does talk about, community. Some of my closest friends are people I've met and worked with for years, through work. And when I moved away and lived away, I had a family of close friends who were also living away from their family. And that kind of becomes your second family. So I think that is important to recognize that, people who don't come from favorable circumstances can still, find and nurture those kinds of relationships with non-blood family, if you will. Let's see, what else? We're almost done. I guess I should end. I actually have to say, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I am a little bit grateful that I was assigned this lesson, because it did make me think about some things in my own family, and just kind of, you know, I thought, gosh, I got to call my grandmother and just tell her, you know, how much I appreciate her. And I am grateful for those ties and those relationships. And I hope that we, you know, can all kind of reflect on that and just take note of the blessings that those ties bring us. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Laura. That was a great, and again, a touching lesson. I think that there's a lot to be had in family history. And I love also where Elder Gong says, if you think it's all been done, go talk to somebody, write their history, have someone in your family. I think there's a million ways we can do it, and a million stories that can be collected, whether we're doing work in the temple or we're just writing our own journal. I think family history is just such a tie that binds and is full of a wealth of information and strength and support. And so thank you, Laura, for sharing with us. I love these pictures. I think that's so great. I think it's awesome, tender. I just wanted to say thank you, President Owen, for being here with us today, and thank the Bishop and Brother Diamond for also being with us today. We're grateful for your presence and to have you with us. And again, I'm grateful, sisters, for each of you for being with us today. And those of you who are joining us online, we're grateful to have you as well. We'll go ahead and close this meeting with a prayer. Deborah, would you mind giving us a closing prayer? Sure. Thanks.
Is it okay if I just say you bet? Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so very grateful for this Sabbath day. We're grateful for the opportunity to gather together as sisters in Zion and to learn of Thee and to strive for understanding of the gospel and to better our families and ourselves and look to Thee in all things. And we ask Thee to please bless us, that we will be mindful of each other and our families and those that we live by, that we will hear and see and understand and be able to serve and do Thy will around us. We ask Thee to please bless our sweet missionaries that are away from us. Elder Gray, Elder Wolf, Elder Dennison and Elder Dennison, and Elder Beasley and Elder Richards and Woods. We ask Thee to guide them and watch over them. Bless our sweet missionaries that are serving here in our stake. And we ask Thee to help us, that we will have a great week and that we will remember Thee in all that we do. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.